What if a billionaire known for revolutionizing space travel, electric cars, and tech startups suddenly stepped on stage to sing? Would you believe it? Elon Musk was no stranger to the spotlight. From launching rockets into space to developing electric cars that could change the world, Musk had spent most of his life challenging the limits of what was possible. His name was synonymous with innovation, daring to do what others would never even think of attempting. But there was something that could throw even the most meticulous plans off course: the unknown. And that was exactly what had just been thrown into his lap. The scene was set at the annual tech conference in San Francisco. The air was thick with excitement, as some of the brightest minds in technology gathered to showcase their latest achievements. Musk, the keynote speaker, was already feeling the weight of expectation. After all, he was the man who had made electric cars mainstream, sent humans into space, and promised to one day colonize Mars. The audience, eager to hear what came next, was waiting for Musk to deliver his usual groundbreaking ideas that would push humanity's boundaries. But this year, something felt different. The event was set to begin in just a few hours. Musk was backstage, pacing nervously as he prepared for his speech. The pressure to impress was greater than ever, but that wasn't the real reason for his unease. No, this time it was something else entirely. Musk had been working non-stop for months, barely sleeping and often missing meals in favor of fine-tuning his latest vision. He had prepared countless slides, charts, and speeches, but somehow, it felt like something was missing. He needed a spark, something to make his appearance memorable. But what? That's when Greg, a longtime colleague and close friend, casually threw out the most unexpected challenge. "So, Elon," Greg said, leaning back in his chair as he sipped his coffee. "You've revolutionized cars, rockets, and tech. But I bet you can't do one thing." Elon, already lost in thought, turned to face Greg with a raised eyebrow. "What's that?" "Sing," Greg said, grinning. The room erupted into laughter. Everyone knew Musk was brilliant when it came to engineering, innovation, and business. But singing? That was a whole different ballgame. Elon raised an eyebrow, his mind momentarily distracted from the chaos of preparation. "Sing? You're joking, right?" Greg didn't laugh. "Nope. You've done everything else. But I think the world would be shocked to see you sing in front of everyone. You might even surprise us all." There was a beat of silence, as Musk considered the challenge. He knew Greg was only half joking, but there was something about it that lingered. He was used to being the center of attention for his business ventures, his visionary ideas, and the constant media coverage. But to put himself on stage in front of a crowd and sing, that was something entirely different. It would be risky, vulnerable, and completely outside his comfort zone. But maybe that was exactly what he needed. "All right," Musk said finally, after a long pause, a smirk forming on his face. "I'll do it." Everyone in the room was stunned. Was he serious? Could it be that Elon Musk, the billionaire who had changed the world, was actually going to step outside of his comfort zone and sing in front of a live audience? Greg burst out laughing, but it wasn't the mocking kind. It was more of a surprise mixed with admiration. "All right, man. Let's see what you've got." The challenge had been accepted, and Musk had no idea just how much it was about to change the course of the evening. As the hours ticked down to the conference's opening, Musk found himself thinking more and more about the decision he had just made. Could he really do this? Could he stand on stage in front of hundreds of influential people and show a side of himself that few had ever seen before? He wasn't a musician, he was an engineer, an entrepreneur. What if he failed? What if he made a fool of himself? The fear of failure hit him hard, but there was something else too, a small spark of excitement. For years, Musk had operated within the constraints of expectations. People expected him to be a genius with machines, but what if he could be something more? What if he could prove that he wasn't just a tech mogul, but a person who could break through any barrier, even the one that said he couldn't sing? "Are you sure about this?" Greg asked again, just before they were about to head on stage. He looked over at Musk, who was still dressed in his usual black t-shirt and jeans, looking out at the crowd from behind the curtains. "Yep," Musk said, more confidently than he actually felt. "Let's do this." The crowd was buzzing with anticipation. People whispered excitedly among themselves, wondering what Musk had up his sleeve. They were all expecting the usual, a vision for the future, an ambitious plan to change the world. But no one expected this. No one had any idea that the man they came to hear about Mars and electric cars was about to do something no one could have ever predicted. As the lights dimmed and the audience settled, Musk stood backstage, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. It wasn't just a speech anymore. It wasn't even about tech. It was about showing everyone that he wasn't bound by the limitations others expected of him. It was about embracing vulnerability, taking risks, and daring to be different. And then the moment came. The stage manager gave him a nod, signaling that it was time. Musk took a deep breath, adjusted the microphone, and stepped into the spotlight. The crowd went silent, all eyes on him. Musk stood there for a second, looking at the sea of faces in front of him. His palms were sweating, his heart racing. He was stepping into the unknown. "Ladies and gentlemen," Musk said, his voice shaky but clear, "I was challenged to do something tonight that I've never done before. And while I'm not sure I'm qualified, I'm going to give it a try anyway." The audience sat on the edge of their seats, unsure of what to expect. Some of them had already started to whisper among themselves, thinking this was just part of the usual Musk eccentricity. But this wasn't just another stunt. "This one's for you, Greg," Elon said, looking directly at his friend, who sat in the front row, wide-eyed and grinning. And with that, Elon Musk began to sing. This unexpected challenge would turn out to be far more than just a quirky moment in a tech conference. It would push Musk to step outside of his comfort zone and into a world he'd never imagined. As the first notes filled the room, the crowd was stunned. No one expected Elon Musk to sing, but he was about to prove that, sometimes, the most unexpected moments are the ones that change everything. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk had always been a man driven by a singular force, ambition. It wasn't something he was taught. It was something that had been in his bones from the moment he was born. Raised in Pretoria, South Africa, by his father Elon Musk, a successful engineer, and his mother May, a model and dietitian, Elon had always been surrounded by a blend of technical know-how and an undeniable sense of discipline. His parents, though separated, both shaped his early years in ways that would define his future. Elon Musk was a complicated figure. He was intelligent, driven, and sharp, but his relationship with his son was distant, even harsh at times. Elon's father, while brilliant, was emotionally unavailable, leaving Elon to fend for himself in the realm of understanding his place in the world. Elon often describes his childhood as isolating. He was a bookish, awkward kid who spent much of his time reading, delving into fantasy novels, and exploring ideas far beyond his years. His father would sometimes criticize his lack of physicality or social aptitude, but Elon's mind was already miles ahead. It wasn't a question of strength or popularity. It was a matter of vision, of seeing the world differently, of imagining things others couldn't even dream of. His mother, on the other hand, was the emotional anchor. May Musk was fiercely supportive and encouraging, constantly instilling in Elon a belief that he could accomplish anything. She pushed him to think for himself and chase the wild ideas he often had. Elon would later credit his mother with being his greatest inspiration, especially when it came to the realization that failure wasn't something to fear, but something to learn from. Her wisdom, though gentle, was firm, and it helped to shape Elon's mindset. Despite the contrasting influences of his parents, Elon remained laser-focused on his path. He had always been drawn to technology, ever since he was a young boy. At the age of 10, he became obsessed with computers, teaching himself how to code by reading a manual for the Commodore VIC-20, an early personal computer. By the time he was 12, he had built his own video game, Blaster, and sold it for $500 to a local computer magazine. This was Elon Musk's first taste of success, but it wasn't his last. Growing up, Musk was often bullied for being different. His high intelligence made him stand out in school, and that wasn't always a good thing. He was called names, made fun of, and even bullied to the point where he was once hospitalized after a particularly bad incident. That experience only deepened his sense of isolation, but it also fueled his desire to prove everyone wrong. If they didn't understand him, then he would show them. He would do things no one else had ever done, and he would do them on his terms. It was during these formative years that Musk began to formulate his grand vision of the future, a future where humanity wasn't just confined to Earth, but could extend to the stars. He read voraciously, diving into science fiction and technical books that stretched the limits of what he believed was possible. The idea of creating something that could change the world wasn't a far-off fantasy for him. It was an inevitability. Musk's mind was already racing ahead to the next big idea. But it wasn't just about creating products or technologies, it was about shaping the future. By the time he was 17, Musk had made a bold decision to leave South Africa. He wanted to go to America, the land of opportunity. He had dreams of attending Stanford University and becoming a part of the Silicon Valley ecosystem, but the cost of a plane ticket was more than he could afford. Instead, Musk moved to Canada and enrolled at Queen's University, where he would spend 2 years before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania. The journey wasn't an easy one, but it was a necessary one. Elon Musk wasn't just following a dream, he was laying the groundwork for something much bigger. At Penn, Musk pursued degrees in both physics and economics, subjects that would serve as the foundation for his entrepreneurial ventures. But even in the hallowed halls of academia, Musk wasn't like other students. He wasn't there to follow in the footsteps of his professors or climb the academic ladder. He was there to learn how to make the impossible possible. His first major entrepreneurial venture came when he co-founded Zip2, a software company designed to provide business directories and maps for newspapers. The company was a success, and in 1999, it was sold to Compaq for nearly $300 million. Musk walked away with $22 million, but instead of resting on his laurels, he immediately set his sights on something bigger. He founded X.com, which would later become PayPal, an online payment system that would revolutionize the way people transferred money. PayPal's success caught the attention of the world, and in 2002, it was sold to eBay for $1.5 billion. Musk made $165 million from the sale, but even that wasn't enough to satisfy him. He wanted more. Musk had set his sights on space. He founded SpaceX in 2002 with the goal of making space travel more affordable and eventually enabling humanity to colonize Mars. The road was anything but smooth. There were failures, rockets that didn't launch, funding issues, and constant skepticism from the industry. But Musk's determination never wavered. He poured his own money into the company, betting everything on the idea that he could make space travel a reality. At the same time, Musk was revolutionizing the automobile industry with Tesla Motors, a company he joined in 2004. His goal was simple: to make electric cars mainstream. The world thought he was crazy, but Musk never stopped pushing. Tesla became a household name, and Musk became one of the wealthiest men in the world. Through it all, Musk had become the embodiment of innovation. His ability to think outside the box, to challenge the status quo, and to make seemingly impossible dreams a reality was unmatched. Yet, despite his immense success, there was one thing Musk never seemed to have fully mastered: himself. He was still, at his core, a man driven by something deep within him. A man who had always felt the weight of expectation, who had never truly known what it meant to be vulnerable or to step outside the carefully crafted persona of the tech mogul. And so, as he stood backstage, preparing for an event that was supposed to be yet another presentation of his latest business ventures, something unexpected happened. Greg's offhand challenge to sing had triggered something inside Musk. It was a moment of rebellion, a chance to break free from the expectations that had defined him for so long. Could it be that, in the most unexpected of ways, this challenge would offer Elon Musk something that his billions, his companies, and his fame never could? A chance to show the world who he really was, not just a businessman, but a human being, with all the complexity, fears, and vulnerabilities that come with it. As the minutes ticked down before the event, Elon Musk had no idea what lay ahead. All he knew was that, for the first time in years, he was about to take a risk that wasn't about business. It was about him. And that, in itself, was the most unexpected thing of all. The hours before the conference were a blur. Musk could hardly focus. He had just agreed to sing, something so far outside his comfort zone that he couldn't quite believe he'd actually committed to it. But the truth was, a small part of him felt exhilarated by the idea. For once, he wasn't just Elon Musk, the genius tech mogul. He wasn't the man responsible for sending rockets into space or for putting electric cars on the road. He wasn't the guy who was supposed to have all the answers. No, in that moment, he was just a man about to step on stage and sing in front of a crowd of thousands. And the truth was, he was terrified. Backstage, Elon paced back and forth, his mind racing with doubts. Could he really do this? Was it too late to back out? What if he made a fool of himself? The voice of self-doubt was deafening, louder than the applause that had greeted him at countless events before. In his mind, he was playing through worst-case scenarios. What if he cracked under the pressure? What if the audience laughed? What if, despite everything, his attempt to break free from the expectations others had for him ended up being a colossal failure? The room around him was quiet, too quiet. Greg was nearby, fiddling with his phone, acting as though he hadn't just issued the challenge of a lifetime. He seemed calm, even relaxed, and that only made Elon's anxiety worse. Elon had always admired Greg's ability to keep his cool, but now, in this moment, it felt like everyone else was carefree, while he was spiraling with fear. "Hey, man," Greg said, breaking the silence. "You're gonna kill it. Just go out there and have fun. The crowd's gonna love it. Who knows? You might even discover something new about yourself." Musk looked at his friend, trying to find reassurance in his words, but the truth was, Greg wasn't feeling the same pressure. Elon had built his reputation on changing the world. But could he really live up to that same level of expectation with something as simple, and as vulnerable as singing? For a moment, he wished he could take the easy route. He wished he could retreat into the comfort of business pitches, board meetings, and product launches. After all, he had a whole new line of Tesla vehicles to discuss, a fresh batch of rockets ready for launch, and plans to take humanity to Mars. But instead, he was standing here, about to perform something that seemed so trivial in comparison. Or was it? As the minutes ticked down, Elon's thoughts grew more erratic. He thought about how, for so many years, he had always been in control. His life had been defined by calculated risks, by solving problems, by being the visionary who could make things happen. But singing? That was something different entirely. There was no formula to follow, no blueprint to guide him. The fear of failure was palpable, not just because he might be bad at it, but because it was a step into the unknown, a place where even the greatest minds can't predict the outcome. Despite the fear swirling in his chest, there was a part of him that couldn't back down. He had spent his entire life defying expectations. When the world doubted his ability to create an electric car company, he pushed ahead. When people scoffed at the idea of colonizing Mars, he pressed on. So why should this be any different? But the truth was, the stakes felt higher this time. This wasn't about a company or a product. This was about himself. This was about revealing the side of Elon Musk that no one had ever seen before, the human, vulnerable side. What if the world wasn't ready for that? What if the people who admired him for his genius and innovation couldn't handle seeing him like this? What if he failed not just in the eyes of his audience but in his own? Greg's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts again. You've got this, man. The world doesn't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be real. And you know what? Real is way cooler than perfect. Musk stared at his friend, his eyes narrowing. Greg's word struck a chord in him. Real. That was the thing, wasn't it? People had come to expect Musk to be this larger-than-life figure who could do no wrong. But maybe, just maybe, by taking this leap, he could show the world that even he wasn't invincible, that he wasn't some untouchable figure who lived in the clouds of innovation. He was a person, someone who felt the weight of every decision, every expectation. And maybe that was okay. Maybe, for once, he could just be Elon, not the billionaire entrepreneur, but the man who was willing to take a risk, to step outside his comfort zone. The voice of doubt was still there, but now, it wasn't as loud. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. All right. Let's do this, Musk said, his voice steadying. Greg flashed a grin. That's the spirit. The stage manager appeared at the door, giving Musk a brief, professional nod. It's time. Musk swallowed hard, nodding back. The stage was just beyond the curtains, and the weight of what was about to happen felt heavier with each step he took. The sound of the audience's chatter grew louder as he walked toward the spotlight. The lights blazed, and his heart skipped a beat. He had done so many things in his life that defied belief, but this was unlike anything else. As he took his first step onto the stage, the audience fell silent. The spotlight hit him, casting his shadow large and imposing on the stage floor. For a brief moment, he was paralyzed. The whole world seemed to be watching, waiting. This is it, he thought. This is my moment. The real question was, who would he be in this moment? Would he be the same Elon Musk they all knew, or would he become something different? Something real. The microphone stood before him, ready to amplify his every breath. And for the first time in years, Elon Musk felt something unfamiliar, vulnerability. He took another step forward, his nerves still buzzing, but this time, he felt a glimmer of something else, excitement, anticipation, and maybe, just maybe, a sense of freedom. Before he could second-guess himself, he spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady but with an edge of uncertainty. Tonight, I'm not here to talk about rockets, electric cars, or Mars. Tonight, I'm here to do something I never thought I'd do. The audience leaned in, and Musk could feel the weight of their curiosity pressing in. I'm here to sing, he said, surprising even himself with how calm his voice sounded. And with that, the first note rang out. The first note echoed into the microphone, and for a split second, Elon Musk felt the world stop. The silence in the room was deafening. He could almost hear the collective intake of breath from the audience as they awaited his next move. It wasn't a long pause, but it felt like an eternity. His heart raced, and his palms grew clammy. What was he doing? The fear surged back, stronger than ever. What if this was the moment that proved he wasn't what everyone thought he was? What if this moment shattered the persona he had spent years building? But then, something shifted. As the music started to play in the background, Elon took another deep breath. The anxiety was still there, but it was different now. It wasn't suffocating him. It wasn't holding him back. It was just there, like an old friend that had come along for the ride. The music had a soft, rhythmic pulse, steady but inviting. The crowd was still, waiting for him to find his rhythm, his voice. There was no turning back now. He closed his eyes for just a moment, letting the lyrics fill his mind. For once, he wasn't thinking about Mars, or Tesla's next big leap, or SpaceX's latest mission. He wasn't worried about stock prices or the millions of people who followed his every tweet. He wasn't even worried about failing. Instead, he was thinking about something else entirely, the simple act of being present. Of taking this moment for himself. He realized that for so long, he had been focused on the future, on the next big challenge, the next giant leap for humanity. But tonight, in this moment, it wasn't about that. It was about him, in the here and now, expressing himself in a way he never had before. And then, as if the universe itself had given him permission, his voice began to find its way. It wasn't perfect, far from it. His voice cracked on the first few lines, the notes wavering with the nervous energy coursing through him. But something miraculous happened. The audience didn't laugh. They didn't jeer or make fun of him. They were with him, every step of the way. They were rooting for him. The more he sang, the more his fear melted away. Musk wasn't just a businessman or a billionaire. In this moment, he was a person, a human being just like anyone else. And there was a kind of raw beauty in that. The vulnerability he felt wasn't a weakness, it was a bridge to something greater. It was a connection with his audience that no business deal, no rocket launch, could ever offer. He felt the energy of the crowd, their presence surrounding him like a warm embrace. They weren't judging him, they weren't expecting perfection. They were giving him something he hadn't realized he needed, permission to be imperfect. To be real. Musk's voice began to strengthen as he hit the chorus, his body moving with the music. He wasn't just singing the words anymore, he was living them. The crowd swayed in unison with him, clapping along to the beat, their cheers growing louder with every passing second. Elon Musk, the man who had never once thought of himself as a performer, was becoming a part of something bigger than himself. And in that moment, he realized how deeply human this experience was. The pressure he had felt earlier, the overwhelming burden of being the visionary, the genius, the problem solver, began to fade. He finished the song to a roaring applause, his heart still pounding in his chest, but now with a sense of exhilaration, not fear. He stepped back from the microphone, and for a brief moment, his mind went blank. Had he really done it? Had he really sung in front of thousands of people? It didn't matter that his voice wasn't flawless, or that he hadn't hit every note with precision. What mattered was that he had done something he'd never thought possible. Something that had terrified him, something that had forced him to step out of his carefully constructed shell. The applause continued, and Elon took a moment to soak it in. He felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of relief. He had taken the risk, he had stepped into the unknown, and somehow, it had worked. He had shown the world, and more importantly, himself, that he was capable of more than he ever imagined. As he walked off the stage, the adrenaline still pumping through his veins, he was met by Greg, who gave him a high five. "Man, you nailed it," Greg said, a wide grin on his face. "I told you they'd love it." Elon couldn't help but smile back. "I can't believe I actually did it." "You were incredible," Greg said, patting him on the back. "That was more than just singing. You gave everyone something real, man. That's the thing people crave, authenticity." Elon's mind was still reeling from the performance, but Greg's words rang true. He hadn't just performed a song. He had shared a piece of himself with the world. He had allowed himself to be vulnerable, and in doing so, he had connected with the audience in a way that nothing else could have. But as the night wore on and the excitement began to settle, another, deeper thought began to form in Elon's mind. This moment, this act of singing, had revealed something far more profound than he had anticipated. It wasn't just about stepping outside of his comfort zone, it was about redefining who he was. In that performance, he hadn't just defied expectations, he had shown himself that he wasn't just a product of his accomplishments. He was more than just the sum of his achievements. This moment had shifted something in him. It was a revelation, a realization that he was not bound by the narrative others had written for him. He could be both the visionary and the person. He could be both the man who changed the world and the man who didn't always have it all together. As he left the stage and the buzz of the crowd started to fade, Elon Musk felt something else. It was a quiet sense of peace, mixed with the kind of excitement that only comes from knowing you've done something that changed you forever. And in that peace, Elon Musk realized he had just begun a new journey. One that would push him to be not just a leader in the world of technology, but a leader of a different kind, one who showed that vulnerability, authenticity, and imperfection could be just as powerful as innovation, rockets, and electric cars. It was a journey that, for the first time, Elon Musk wasn't sure where it would lead. But for the first time in a long time, he was okay with that. The applause slowly faded as Elon Musk stepped off the stage, his heart still pounding in his chest, a swirl of emotions filling him. There was a moment of disbelief, a sharp contrast to the overwhelming high he felt just moments before. Had he really done that? Had he really gone through with it and made it out in one piece? Greg, who had been waiting in the wings, flashed him an approving grin as he walked toward him. "You killed it, man," he said, giving Elon a quick hug. "I didn't know you had it in you." Elon chuckled, still trying to catch his breath. "Neither did I." But as the excitement started to die down and the adrenaline wore off, something shifted in Elon's mind. As he stood there, amidst the noise of the backstage crew packing up and the still echoing applause from the crowd, a profound realization began to take root inside him. It wasn't just the thrill of having performed that was settling in. It was the truth that had begun to surface through the layers of pressure and expectations he had lived with for years. For so long, Elon had placed a monumental weight on himself. He was the one who built companies from the ground up. He was the one whose every move was watched, every idea analyzed. He had created a public image that was larger than life. The visionary who could make the impossible happen. But here, on this stage, in front of an audience that had cheered him on for his raw vulnerability, Elon understood something deep within him: he didn't need to be perfect. In that moment, singing off-key, making mistakes, and feeling exposed, it didn't take away from who he was. Instead, it showed a side of him that had been hidden behind a wall of ambition and innovation for so long. This was the real Elon, the one who had fears, doubts, and imperfections. And he realized, with an unexpected clarity, that maybe this was the most powerful version of himself he could offer the world. As he walked backstage to join the other performers and the event organizers, a familiar face appeared in the crowd. It was Steve, an old friend from Musk's earlier days in the tech world. Steve had always been a little more grounded than most of Musk's acquaintances, a reminder of a simpler time before Musk's name was synonymous with billionaire genius. Steve approached him with a smile, his eyes twinkling with something more than just admiration. "Elon, that was something," Steve said, his voice soft but sincere. "I've never seen you like that before." Elon smiled, feeling the weight of the conversation and the vulnerability he had just bared. "I wasn't sure what I was doing, honestly. But it felt freeing." Steve raised an eyebrow, as though he could sense the deeper shift occurring inside Musk. "You know, a lot of people would never do something like that. A lot of people in your position would never risk looking foolish." Musk nodded, realizing just how much truth there was in those words. He had spent so much of his life trying to avoid the perception of failure, trying to protect his image as the unstoppable visionary. But for the first time, he was beginning to feel that perhaps his failures, his imperfections, were what made him human. And maybe, just maybe, that was where his real strength lay. "I guess the thing is," Elon continued, his voice quieter now, "I've always been so focused on the future, on what's next. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking about anything except being right there, singing. It was a strange kind of peace." Steve chuckled. "A strange kind of peace? I'd call it an epiphany." Elon looked down for a moment, contemplating Steve's words. An epiphany. Maybe that was exactly what it was. In front of the crowd, with the weight of all his fears and self-doubts pressing in on him, he had experienced something profound. It wasn't just about overcoming the fear of singing. It was about seeing himself through a new lens, accepting his own humanity in a way he hadn't before. The applause, the cheers, the sense of accomplishment were all secondary. What mattered was the truth he had come to understand: he didn't have to be the perfect, untouchable genius everyone expected him to be. For the first time, he didn't feel the crushing pressure of having to live up to his reputation. Instead, he felt liberated, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. As the night wore on and the after-party continued, Elon found himself slipping away from the crowd, needing some space to process the whirlwind of emotions that had flooded him. He stepped out onto the balcony of the venue, looking up at the stars, the city lights twinkling below. It was then that something unexpected happened, a moment of quiet reflection amidst the noise. He thought about his journey. From the early days of Zip2 to PayPal, and the incredible highs and lows he had faced with Tesla, SpaceX, and beyond, there had always been one constant: he had never allowed himself to truly let go. He had always kept moving forward, pushing through challenges, making impossible goals a reality. But at what cost? In that moment, Elon realized that he had been so focused on the big picture, on changing the world, that he had neglected the little things, the moments of joy and self-discovery along the way. And tonight, for the first time, he had stepped into a moment of vulnerability. He had allowed himself to be imperfect, to be human. And the world hadn't rejected him for it. Instead, it had embraced him. As he gazed at the stars above, Elon thought about how this moment could change everything for him. Maybe the next step for him wasn't just about creating the next great technological innovation or space mission. Maybe the next step was about embracing who he truly was, imperfections and all, and allowing that version of himself to inspire others. He didn't have all the answers yet, but in that moment, he understood one thing: the future didn't have to be perfect, just real. And with that, Elon Musk, the visionary, the innovator, the billionaire entrepreneur, finally allowed himself to relax. For the first time in years, he was exactly where he needed to be. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that scares you, but could lead to your greatest breakthrough? The next few days after the performance were a blur of excitement and newfound clarity for Elon Musk. He had expected to be met with questions, with critics perhaps poking holes in his decision to sing in front of thousands of people. But what he hadn't anticipated was the wave of support that came in its wake. Social media was abuzz with clips of his performance, the internet buzzing with both surprise and admiration. Memes circulated, but they were different this time. The reactions weren't mocking, they were warm, supportive, even a bit in awe of the billionaire's vulnerability. Elon wasn't used to this kind of attention. The kind of attention that didn't come with expectations, didn't come with the pressure of his business empire, but instead with admiration for simply being human. He sat in his office at SpaceX, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows, his mind wandering. His desk, usually covered with complex plans and projections for the future of Mars or the next phase of Tesla's expansion, was almost empty. There were still a few papers on the side, but his attention was no longer on them. His mind, instead, kept drifting back to that night on the stage, the raw energy of the crowd, and the unexpected peace that had washed over him when he finally allowed himself to let go. Greg had been right. What he had shared with that audience wasn't just a performance, it was a part of himself, an honest, unguarded piece that he rarely allowed others to see. In that fleeting moment, Elon Musk had given up the heavy armor he'd worn for so long, the invincible, visionary mask he had so carefully constructed. And the world had embraced him. In a way, it had shifted something deeper inside him, something he hadn't even known he needed. He thought about his relationships, with his family, friends, and colleagues, and how so many of them had been based on the idea of success. On what he could achieve, what he could build, and how he could lead others toward a future of innovation. But had he ever allowed himself to be seen just as a person, not just the guy behind groundbreaking companies? That night, he had connected with people on a level that had nothing to do with his accomplishments. It was all about being real. Being vulnerable. And that, he realized, was something he wanted more of in his life. He turned his attention to the message that had been sent to him through social media. His inbox was filled with hundreds of messages, most of them positive, congratulating him for taking the leap. Many even thanked him for showing them that it was okay to step outside their comfort zones. And there was one message in particular that stuck out to him. It was from his sister, Tosca Musk. "I've always known you were capable of this kind of bravery, but seeing you on that stage was something else. I'm proud of you, Elle. This was your most important achievement yet." Her words hit him in a way he didn't expect. Tosca had always been supportive, but seeing this new side of him, this side of courage and vulnerability, seemed to unlock something deeper between them. For the first time in years, he felt a genuine connection with his family. He realized that perhaps the distance he had created between himself and the people closest to him had been because of his fear of being seen as less than perfect. But now, he understood that vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was what made him stronger, more human. And it had created a bond with his sister that felt more authentic than any business partnership he'd ever had. Elon closed his eyes for a moment, thinking back on his journey. He had spent so much of his life pushing boundaries, breaking barriers, and making history. He had often believed that in order to truly change the world, he needed to be a force of nature, unyielding, invincible, and constantly striving for perfection. But in that moment of singing, when everything was raw and unpolished, he had realized that the greatest breakthroughs, the most lasting connections, weren't born from perfection. They were born from authenticity. Elon didn't need to be the perfect innovator or the flawless billionaire to make an impact. He didn't need to be untouchable. The world, and more importantly, the people around him, wanted the real him, not the persona he had built. And that realness had the power to inspire change in ways he couldn't even begin to comprehend. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. He had always been a man of the future, constantly looking ahead to the next great challenge. But now, in the quiet after the storm, Elon Musk found himself looking inward, too. In the days that followed, he made a promise to himself. It was a promise to continue being authentic, to embrace vulnerability, and to open himself up to the things that mattered most in life. It wasn't about the next technological breakthrough. It wasn't about being the smartest or the most successful. It was about being real, being present, and allowing those connections, with family, friends, and the world, to be his true legacy. And so, as he moved forward in his personal and professional life, Elon Musk found a new sense of balance. The future was still there, calling to him, filled with new possibilities. But now, he understood that he didn't have to chase it alone, and he didn't have to be perfect. In fact, it was in the moments of imperfection that he felt most alive, most connected to the world around him. Elon Musk was no longer just the brilliant innovator. He was a man who had learned to embrace the power of being human, and in doing so, he had unlocked a new chapter in his life, one where the greatest achievement was no longer about creating the impossible but about learning to be fully present in the moments that truly mattered. The world had seen him as something larger than life, a figure built on achievements, ambition, and unrelenting drive. But in his own eyes, Elon Musk had finally become something much more significant. He had become the person he had always longed to be, vulnerable, authentic, and at peace with himself. And as he looked out over the horizon, he knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. Weeks passed after Elon's surprising performance, and though the world around him had largely moved on, something had changed inside him. That small moment, standing on stage, singing imperfectly, had unlocked something within him, a vulnerability he hadn't known he was missing. But now, as the dust settled, a new challenge loomed on the horizon. The next big hurdle for Elon wasn't in a boardroom or a lab. It wasn't about launching a new rocket, or about creating the next big technological innovation. No, the challenge was far more personal. For the first time in his life, Elon felt the weight of his own humanity pressing down on him. He had always been driven by purpose. Everything had been about building the future, about leaving a legacy of innovation. But as he looked at his life now, he realized that while he had conquered space and revolutionized the electric car industry, he had neglected one of the most important aspects of life, personal relationships. He wasn't sure where to begin, but he knew it was time to focus on the things that truly mattered outside of his businesses. One evening, while at dinner with a few close friends, the conversation inevitably turned to the usual topics: SpaceX, Tesla, and the future. But this time, something in Elon's demeanor had shifted. He wasn't speaking with the usual intensity, the urgency to change the world. Instead, he was quieter, more reflective. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," he said, setting down his fork. "Not the future of space travel or electric cars, but my future. I've spent so many years building companies, working toward goals that I forgot to actually live the life I'm working to create. It's easy to get caught up in the next big thing, but I think I need to focus on the things that matter more: my family, my friends, and my own happiness." His friend, Greg, raised an eyebrow. "That's a pretty big realization, Elon. I mean, you're known for being driven, but to hear you say this, it's something." Elon gave a small, contemplative smile. "I guess it's a lesson in slowing down. Sometimes, the things you're building are so big, you don't realize you're missing out on the small moments that make life worth living." Greg nodded. "It's like the rocket launches. You always have this big vision, but the beauty is in the details, the small steps that lead to the big moments." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Elon couldn't shake the feeling that there was more he needed to do. He realized that what he had been craving wasn't just another new challenge, but a chance to connect, to rekindle the relationships that had slipped through the cracks over the years. He had a family, friends, and a support system, but he had never given them the attention they truly deserved. Work had always been his refuge, his obsession. But now, as he took a moment to step back, he realized that those relationships, real, human connections, were where true fulfillment lay. That night, as he returned to his Tesla Model S, the quiet of the car gave him space to think. He had built so many things in his life, but there was one thing he had yet to build in any real, lasting way: personal connections. He couldn't keep hiding behind the excuse of busyness or the mission. Something inside him clicked. The following morning, Elon made a list of the people who mattered most to him, the people he'd neglected over the years because of his all-consuming drive. His ex-wife Tallulah Riley, his children, his friends from before the Tesla and SpaceX fame, and even his mother, Mae Musk, who had been a constant but whose calls he often brushed off for meetings or travel. He texted his assistant, asking her to organize a gathering with his closest friends and family. It wasn't a grand event or a public affair. It was simple, intimate, a chance to reconnect with the people who truly cared about him, without the distractions of work or fame. "Hey, let's have dinner at my place tomorrow. No work talk, just us. We'll figure it out." The idea felt freeing to him, so much so that he found himself smiling at the thought of it. For once, he was stepping away from the endless cycle of meetings, conferences, and emails that often defined his life. He didn't have to constantly be building or innovating. He didn't have to be in control. He simply needed to show up, be present, and take joy in the small things. The dinner that followed was nothing like the lavish banquets he often hosted for business and tech leaders. Instead, it was an informal gathering of his closest confidants. Tallulah was there, his children, and a few longtime friends who had known him long before the SpaceX and Tesla days. The conversation was light, filled with laughter and stories of old times. Elon shared a bit about his unexpected singing performance, much to the amusement of his family. They teased him playfully, but there was warmth in the room, a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. "I have to say, Elon," Tallulah remarked as they sipped wine, "that performance was a side of you I never expected. You've always been so serious. It's good to see you, well, a little less Elon Musk and a little more human." Elon chuckled, feeling the familiar tension ease from his shoulders. It was freeing, honestly. "I think I need to do more of that, step out of my comfort zone. Life's not all about being the guy who makes the next billion-dollar company, you know." The night wore on with ease, and as the last guest left, Elon felt a contentment he hadn't known in years. For once, he had simply existed, without the weight of his public persona, without the burden of his work, and without the pressure of changing the world. Instead, he had allowed himself to be, and that felt like the most important thing of all. As he cleaned up the kitchen, Elon found himself reflecting on what had brought him to this point. He was on the precipice of something entirely new, not just professionally, but personally. He had conquered the challenges of space travel, he had pushed the boundaries of electric vehicles, but the real challenge now was to conquer the quiet moments of life. The relationships. The time spent with those he loved. For Elon Musk, the journey was no longer just about revolutionizing industries, it was about learning to live a more balanced, authentic life. And for the first time in a long while, Elon didn't feel like he was racing against the clock. He simply felt at peace. As the weeks passed, Elon Musk's life slowly began to shift in ways he hadn't fully anticipated. What started as a simple acknowledgement that he needed to reconnect with his loved ones had transformed into something far more profound. He was rediscovering the human connections he had neglected for so long. He was beginning to build a new kind of future, one that balanced his incredible ambitions with a deepened appreciation for the present. Elon's phone rang in the early morning, as it often did. It was his assistant, reminding him of another meeting, another high-stakes conversation with investors, another negotiation to lock down future funding for one of his many projects. But this time, instead of diving straight into his usual mode of productivity, Elon felt a shift in his approach. He picked up the phone but didn't dive into business. "You know what, let's push that meeting until next week," he said with an uncharacteristic calm. "I've got some personal things to handle." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, but his assistant, used to his fast-paced, no-nonsense demeanor, quickly adapted. "Got it, Elon. Anything specific?" Elon thought for a moment before responding. "I've decided to take a step back from a few things. It's time to focus on the big picture, my family, my health, my friends. There's more to life than just work." She seemed to pause again, perhaps unsure of whether he was serious or not, but when he didn't add any qualifiers, she responded, "Understood. I'll reschedule everything and let you focus on those priorities." The conversation felt different. There was a weight lifted from his shoulders, as though he was making a conscious decision to ease up, to allow space for something else, something other than the constant grind. Later that morning, he sent out a simple message to his family, his closest friends, and even a few colleagues who had supported him through the years. It was a simple invitation. "Let's do something together. No work talk, no grand plans, just an afternoon together, enjoying life." To his surprise, nearly everyone accepted, eager to join him for a casual day out. He had set up an outdoor barbecue at one of his private properties, the perfect setting for a relaxed afternoon. It wasn't about impressing anyone or showcasing his wealth, it was about sharing space and time with people he cared about. As the day approached, Elon found himself feeling oddly nervous. It wasn't the usual pressure he felt before a major event or a crucial business meeting. It was something different, something more personal. What if the people he had neglected over the years didn't want to spend time with him? What if they resented him for being so absent from their lives? But those worries quickly melted away as soon as the first guests began to arrive. Tosca, his sister, showed up with a huge smile on her face, immediately taking charge of the grill. His mother, May, arrived not long after, and they shared an easy, warm hug, one that conveyed so much without saying a word. His children ran around in the yard, their laughter echoing through the air. It was simple, yes, but it was also perfect. There was no agenda, no pressure to perform, no expectations. Just a gathering of people who cared about each other, enjoying each other's company. At one point during the afternoon, as the sun began to set, Elon found himself sitting on a bench with Greg, watching the kids play and chatting about life. "Seems like you figured out how to do the balance thing," Greg said, a knowing smile on his face. Elon chuckled softly. "It's still a work in progress. But you're right, I think I'm learning. For so long, I thought I had to sacrifice everything for my work, but I've realized that work doesn't mean anything if I don't have the people I care about by my side." Greg nodded, his expression thoughtful. It's a hard lesson to learn, especially for someone like you. But it's the kind of lesson that shapes the future. It'll change the way you approach everything, trust me. Elon looked out at his family, a small sense of peace washing over him. Maybe this is the future. Not the next Mars mission, or the new Tesla model. Maybe the future is learning to be present with the people who matter. Greg clinked his beer bottle against Elon's. To the future, then. And to the people who make it worth living. As the afternoon faded into evening, the conversation continued to flow, and the group felt more like a family than a collection of business-minded individuals. The laughter, the easy conversation, the shared experiences, it was a reminder of what truly mattered. Elon had spent so much time thinking about the future of humanity, about space, about technological revolutions, but for the first time, he felt connected to the future in a way that wasn't about industry or innovation, it was about the people who would shape that future alongside him. And then, as if the universe was affirming his realization, an idea struck Elon, one that took him by surprise. The next morning, while driving to another meeting, Elon reflected on the afternoon and what it had meant to him. He realized that perhaps the next chapter of his life wasn't about another game-changing invention or revolutionizing an entire industry. Maybe it was about building a new kind of company, one that not only prioritized innovation but also understood the importance of human connection, of personal well-being, and of maintaining relationships. Elon thought back to the day he'd spent with his family. The idea of simply taking a step back, of embracing the present, of reconnecting with those around him, it seemed revolutionary in its own right. And maybe, just maybe, that was the next big idea. To build a company that valued humanity above all else. Over the next few months, Elon began to actively shape this new vision. He spent less time in the boardrooms of SpaceX and Tesla, focusing instead on the people who had supported him throughout his journey. He began to prioritize his family, his friends, and the relationships he had neglected. More importantly, he began to look at his companies through a new lens, not just as engines of growth, but as places that could cultivate well-being, balance, and human connection alongside technological progress. The future he had once envisioned, one of rockets, electric cars, and world-changing innovations, had shifted. It was no longer just about technology for the sake of technology. It was about creating a future where the innovations he was driving could enhance the lives of the people he cared about, and ultimately, the world. As Elon stood in front of his team a few months later, he shared his vision. The next phase of my life isn't just about technology, he said, his voice steady. It's about building a future where we prioritize people, the people behind the technology. The future isn't just about what we can build. It's about how we live, how we connect, and how we grow together. The crowd was quiet for a moment, taking in his words. Then, as if on cue, the applause began. It wasn't just for the new vision he had proposed. It was for the man who had found a new sense of purpose, not in the next big tech breakthrough, but in the human connections that made everything else worthwhile. And as the applause echoed through the room, Elon Musk realized that he had just embarked on the most important journey of all. The journey toward building a future where technology and humanity could exist side by side. The shift had happened quietly, almost imperceptibly, but the effects were undeniable. Elon Musk, the relentless visionary who had once been solely driven by a desire to revolutionize the world, was now increasingly aware of the human aspect of his mission. It wasn't just about rockets or electric cars, it was about making sure that, in his pursuit of progress, he didn't lose sight of what made life worth living in the first place: connection, community, and balance. In the months following that day spent with his family, Elon's newfound perspective began to manifest not just in his personal life but in his approach to business as well. His companies, long viewed as the epitome of technological advancement, were now being looked at through a lens of humanism. Elon was no longer content to be known just for his technical achievements. Instead, he wanted his legacy to be about fostering environments where innovation thrived alongside emotional intelligence, mental well-being, and personal connections. He began taking active steps to instill this philosophy within the walls of SpaceX and Tesla. Meetings at both companies were no longer dominated by the usual talk of profitability and production timelines. Instead, there were regular discussions on team well-being, personal development, and finding a healthy work-life balance. Elon himself made it a point to spend more time in the office, not just as a CEO, but as a mentor and a leader who genuinely cared about the people working for him. It wasn't easy, of course. Old habits die hard, and there were plenty of skeptics within both companies who believed that Elon's newfound approach was a distraction from their core mission. "We're here to revolutionize industries, not hold hands and sing Kumbaya," one of SpaceX's top engineers grumbled during a meeting. But Elon, undeterred, would simply reply with a smile, "We'll revolutionize industries, all right. But we'll do it in a way that makes people's lives better, not just more efficient or profitable." Slowly but surely, the culture of his companies began to shift. Employees at both SpaceX and Tesla started taking more personal time off, engaging in creative brainstorming sessions outside the usual rigid work structures, and even participating in workshops designed to help them understand their own emotional intelligence. The results weren't immediate, but they were tangible. People were happier, more engaged, and, perhaps most importantly, more willing to go the extra mile because they felt that their work mattered on a deeper level. It was during one of these workshops that Elon first began to conceptualize his new mission, one that combined the best of what technology could offer with the essential qualities that make life meaningful. At a company-wide seminar, he shared his vision. "Technology is powerful," he began, standing before a sea of eager faces. "But it's not enough. We're all here because we want to build a better future. But a better future isn't just about automating every job or launching people to Mars. A better future means creating a world where technology and humanity coexist in a way that uplifts people, where innovation enhances not just our productivity but our quality of life." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Our mission here at Tesla and SpaceX is not just to innovate for innovation's sake. It's to build a future where technology serves humanity. That means we need to create systems, products, and experiences that help people live better lives. We need to be part of a world that is more connected, more empathetic, and more supportive." The response was mixed. Some employees were inspired, while others remained skeptical. But for Elon, this was a beginning. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to lead his companies, and, by extension, the world, into a future that was more than just about technological dominance. But the changes weren't confined to his companies alone. Elon began to take a more active role in charitable and philanthropic ventures, aiming to use his wealth and influence to promote societal well-being. He had long been criticized for his lack of public philanthropic endeavors, but he knew now that his wealth and platform came with a responsibility to contribute to the betterment of humanity, not just through technological advancements, but through direct action. He partnered with nonprofits that focused on mental health, poverty alleviation, and education. Elon began hosting annual conferences that brought together leaders from the worlds of technology, business, and social impact to discuss how innovation could help address some of the most pressing challenges facing humanity. Through these ventures, Elon found a new sense of fulfillment. While he still had a fire within him to revolutionize the way humans traveled and lived, he now understood that the true power of innovation lay in its ability to uplift people and create positive societal change. The mission had evolved. It was no longer about creating a futuristic world for a select few. It was about ensuring that the future was a place where everyone could thrive, regardless of their circumstances. However, this shift was not without its challenges. Many of Elon's old allies and business partners questioned his new approach. There were even murmurs that he was losing his edge, distracted by personal matters, and not as focused on pushing the boundaries of technology. But Elon remained resolute. He understood the importance of pushing boundaries, but he also recognized that pushing those boundaries didn't have to come at the expense of the people who mattered most. In his quieter moments, when the world's demands grew louder, Elon would often think back to that one performance, singing in front of a crowd. It had been a defining moment in his life, a moment that reminded him of the raw vulnerability that connected all people. Whether you were the CEO of a tech giant or an aspiring musician, there was a shared humanity, a need for connection, a desire to be seen and heard. And with that realization, Elon knew that his next great challenge wasn't just about building the next big thing. It was about leading a revolution of thought, a revolution where the human side of innovation was as important as the technological side. The world was watching. Would this new approach work? Could a tech giant like Tesla or SpaceX thrive while embracing the values of empathy, balance, and well-being? The future remained uncertain, but Elon was no longer afraid of the unknown. For the first time in his life, he was ready to walk forward with a new kind of purpose, a purpose rooted in not just what he could accomplish, but in how he could change the lives of others, for the better. As the sun set on another busy day, Elon sat at his desk, looking at the reflection in the glass window. The world outside was still, but the world inside him was changing, evolving. And he felt a deep sense of peace knowing that the next great step of his journey was one that didn't just involve technology. It involved humanity. As Elon Musk settled into his new approach to life and business, something began to shift in the tech world. People were watching. His competitors, his colleagues, even the general public, all began to take notice of the transformation unfolding before them. The man who had once been synonymous with ruthless ambition, hyper-focus on efficiency, and cutting-edge technology, was now also becoming a symbol of a more balanced, human-centered vision of the future. It was a change that was both exhilarating and humbling for Elon. The idea that people were not only noticing his change of heart but were also rallying behind it, filled him with a sense of responsibility. It wasn't just about reshaping his companies anymore. It was about reshaping the conversation about what it meant to be a leader, a creator, and an innovator. One evening, as he sat at his desk late into the night, Elon received a call from one of his longtime friends and trusted confidants, Larry Page, co-founder of Google. "Elon, I've been hearing some buzz about what's been going on with you lately," Larry began. "And I gotta say, I'm impressed. You're changing the game. People are taking notes, man." Elon chuckled, his mind racing. "It's all about changing the conversation, Larry. I've spent so much of my life focused on the next big thing, on the projects, the launches, the profits. But I've realized that technology, no matter how amazing, doesn't mean much if it doesn't serve people in the long run. It's time we start building a future where the people we're trying to help aren't just seen as consumers. They need to be seen as people, human beings with needs, emotions, and lives." Larry paused for a moment. "I hear you. And you know, a lot of people are still stuck on the old way of thinking, on the idea that you have to be all business to get results. But you're proving something different. You're showing that you can be a visionary and still care about the human side of things." "I'm just getting started," Elon replied, his voice thoughtful. "The next step is to make sure that this isn't just about me. It's about changing the culture, making it clear that innovation and empathy can go hand in hand." Larry nodded, his voice warm with encouragement. "You've got the power to do that. People listen to you. You've got the platform, the reach, and the ideas. Now it's about showing them how to lead differently." The conversation was one of those moments of clarity for Elon. It wasn't just about his own personal transformation, it was about inspiring others to follow suit. If anyone had the ability to influence the tech world's next generation of leaders, it was him. In the days that followed, Elon began working on what would become one of his most ambitious projects yet, a global initiative focused on connecting technology with emotional well-being, mental health, and human fulfillment. He knew it wouldn't be easy, and there would be challenges at every turn. But he was willing to take the risk. After all, he'd taken risks his whole life. Why stop now? He started laying the groundwork for the initiative, reaching out to mental health professionals, educators, and other business leaders who shared his new vision. Elon's idea was simple but revolutionary: creating a platform that combined artificial intelligence, cutting-edge neuroscience, and emotional intelligence training to support people in managing their mental health and achieving their fullest potential. The concept was groundbreaking. He envisioned an AI-powered app that could help people understand their emotions, offer real-time support when they were struggling, and provide tailored strategies to foster resilience, connection, and personal growth. This platform wouldn't just be for people in high-stress industries like tech, it would be for anyone who wanted to learn how to better navigate the complexities of their emotional lives. He assembled a team of experts, including psychologists, behavioral scientists, and engineers, to bring the vision to life. At the same time, he partnered with organizations focused on mental health advocacy and education, ensuring that the project would have a broader societal impact. His goal wasn't just to make a profit, it was to make a difference. Meanwhile, his family continued to be his support system. Tosca and May, in particular, were both excited about his new project and encouraged him to keep pushing forward. They saw firsthand the change in him and knew that his newfound sense of purpose was only going to benefit the world. One afternoon, while taking a break from his planning, Elon took a call from an unlikely source, Oprah Winfrey. She'd been following Elon's recent transformation and wanted to hear more about his new direction. "Elon, I've been watching you, and I have to say, I'm so proud of what you're doing," Oprah said, her voice warm and filled with admiration. "The way you're showing people that it's possible to have both success and compassion is truly inspiring." Elon felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Oprah had been a major influence on him for years, not just as a business mogul, but as someone who had long championed the importance of emotional well-being and personal growth. To hear her speak so highly of his efforts meant more than words could express. "Thank you, Oprah," he replied. "It feels like the right time to do this, you know. I've spent so many years thinking about the big picture, the rockets, the cars, the technology. But now I want to make sure we're taking care of the people who will be living in the future we're creating." Oprah smiled. "That's exactly what the world needs right now. You've always been a visionary, Elon. But now you're showing that true leadership is about more than just pushing boundaries. It's about lifting people up as you go." As the conversation continued, Elon realized how much the narrative around him had changed. He had gone from being the eccentric billionaire who was constantly chasing the next big thing to someone who was now focused on ensuring that his innovations had a meaningful, lasting impact on the lives of everyday people. His vision wasn't just about the future of technology, it was about the future of humanity. A few months later, the global initiative was officially launched, and its impact was immediate. The app became a hit, not just among tech enthusiasts, but also within communities that had long been underserved in terms of mental health resources. Elon's focus on emotional well-being resonated with people from all walks of life, proving that empathy and technological innovation could, in fact, coexist and thrive. Elon continued to push boundaries, not just in space or electric vehicles, but in the way technology could be used to foster human connection. And the world, his companies, his followers, his friends, responded. People from all over the globe reached out, sharing their stories of how Elon's work had changed their lives, how they had found peace and strength in the digital tools that now allowed them to understand themselves better. As Elon looked back at the journey he had taken, from the singular focus on technological advancement to this new approach, which embraced the human side of progress, he knew that he had taken the right path. This new mission was his most important yet, not because it would revolutionize an industry, but because it had the potential to change lives in a way that no rocket or car ever could. The final chapter of Elon Musk's transformation was one that no one had truly expected, not even him. The world had watched as he shifted from being a relentless CEO focused solely on technological conquest to a man driven by a new kind of mission, one that balanced the cutting edge of innovation with an unwavering commitment to human well-being. But what would the future look like for him? Was this the final evolution of Elon Musk, or was there something even more profound awaiting him on the horizon? The answer came unexpectedly. It was a crisp autumn morning when Elon sat alone in his office at Tesla's headquarters, staring out of the floor-to-ceiling windows at the bustling world below. His thoughts were quiet, focused on the new initiatives that had taken root across his companies. The AI-driven mental health platform was thriving. People from all walks of life were benefiting from the tools SpaceX and Tesla had developed to make life easier and more connected, and even the old skeptics within his teams had begun to acknowledge the powerful changes sweeping through the industry. But despite these successes, Elon felt a nagging sense of uncertainty. It wasn't that he doubted the success of his endeavors. Quite the opposite. It was the overwhelming knowledge that, no matter how hard he worked, he couldn't save everyone. Technology could only do so much. There were still so many people struggling with invisible burdens, with personal and societal issues that no app or technology could fix. That realization had begun to weigh on him heavily. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the polished surface of the desk as he pondered his next steps. At that moment, the phone rang. It was a familiar voice. The voice of someone who had been with him through thick and thin, someone who had been by his side since the early days of his ventures. It was May Musk, his mother. "Elon, I'm so proud of everything you've done," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You've built companies that have changed the world, but you've also opened your heart in a way that not many people ever will. You're making a difference in ways that go beyond what I could have ever imagined." Elon smiled softly. It had been a long time since they'd spoken about his personal transformation in this way, and hearing her words gave him a sense of peace. But there was still something he couldn't quite shake. "Thanks, Mom," he replied, his voice thoughtful. "I've been thinking a lot about what comes next. We've built something extraordinary, but there's still so much more to be done. I keep wondering if I'm doing enough. If I can truly make a difference on the scale I want to." May was quiet for a moment, and Elon could almost hear her weighing her words carefully. Then, she spoke with the wisdom that had guided him throughout his life. "Elon, no one person can fix everything. You've already done more than most people ever dream of. But that doesn't mean you stop. It means you take the next step, one that brings you closer to your true legacy." "What do you mean?" Elon asked, intrigued. "You've always been driven by the future," she began. "But now, you're in a position to create a legacy that's about people. About how we live, how we connect, and how we show up for each other. Your work in technology is important, but the heart of your mission lies in the human side of things. Keep going, but don't get lost in the pursuit of perfection. You're already on the path to something greater than you even realize." Elon thought deeply about her words. His mother had always been his grounding force, but today, her words held an added layer of truth. She was right. He had spent so much of his life chasing after an ideal future, but maybe the most important part of his journey was learning how to be present, to focus on the people around him, and to see the human side of everything he did. That afternoon, Elon made a decision. It wasn't just about expanding his companies or pushing the envelope of technology anymore. It was about creating a ripple effect, a movement that would spread through the world, inspiring others to lead with empathy, innovation, and the understanding that progress and humanity could, and should, coexist. He announced his next big initiative. The Musk Foundation would partner with universities, nonprofits, and global leaders to create a program dedicated to teaching the next generation of entrepreneurs not only how to innovate but how to build with purpose. This wasn't just about building sustainable products or launching rockets. It was about building a world where the tech we create serves humanity and where innovation is a tool for compassion, connection, and the well-being of all. He invited the brightest minds, the most creative thinkers, and the passionate doers to come together and create a roadmap for a new kind of economy, one that wasn't solely driven by profit but by the shared values of mutual support, mental health, and collaboration. As the program took shape, Elon found himself reflecting on his own journey. The man who had once been driven by the dream of colonizing Mars and revolutionizing transportation was now a man obsessed with building a world where technology truly served the collective good. In a way, it felt like a return to his roots, back to the idea that technology should always be a tool for improving lives, not just for driving progress. In the months that followed, the program flourished. Students, leaders, and innovators from all over the world gathered to learn, share ideas, and collaborate. The movement was gaining momentum, and soon, it was clear that Elon's new mission wasn't just changing his companies, it was changing the world. And as he stood on a stage, speaking to a crowd of thousands about his vision for the future, Elon realized that he had found the balance he had been searching for. He had embraced the human side of his innovation, and in doing so, he had created a legacy that was far more impactful than anything he could have ever imagined. His true legacy was no longer tied to the things he built, it was tied to the people he had inspired and the world he had helped change. As the crowd erupted into applause, Elon looked out over the sea of faces. He had taken risks, pushed boundaries, and defied expectations. But most importantly, he had learned that the future was not about the technology we create, it was about how we use that technology to make the world a better place. And that, in the end, was the most important mission of all. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? The future is in our hands, and every day is an opportunity to create something meaningful. What will your impact be?